Oh boy, it's finally time to review Vindfald. This is Tivoli Frieden's newest coaster and a rare occurrence of a new thrill coaster opening in Denmark. It's been a long-awaited ride that many enthusiasts like myself have been very excited for, especially because we all believe strongly that this park would get a new coaster, for reasons I will get into soon. While it's only been open for a short while, its reputation as a short but sweet ride with one devilish pothole is a reputation accurately describing its ride experience. While it is quite a small version of a ride type that already often sees small iterations being installed, it still manages to be unique and all of its own. So let's unravel this ride's being. I wrote it on Media Day, thank you by the way, Tivoli Friheden, for that, in May of 2024, and let's talk about this technology.
You are so small! It's funny to me!
Vindfald is a Gerstlauer Eurofighter, a now famous ride model that dates back to 2003 with the opening of the prototype Vildsvinet at Bong Bongland, here in our very own country! And the model has since seen many clones and unique variations, and that means that Denmark now has the oldest and the newest of the type, and I can assure you that the differences between them and their ages are quite noticeable.
Same, but different!
Many thought that since Tivoli Friheden has very limited space, if they were to get a Eurofighter, they'd probably get a 320 or a 320 Plus model. They're very popular clones with a small usage of space and a lot of thrill, but they surprised everyone by getting a custom and very unique layout that still showcases classic elements, and it really fits in the park absolutely fantastically. Of course, it opened here in 2024, 2 years after the accident. It's no secret nor anything we should ignore that Vindfald only exists because its predecessor, Cobra, suffered a tragic accident just 2 years ago in 2022. The park and the CEO has since shown tremendous respect for the situation and expressed their perspective on the accident and why they chose to replace Cobra with Vindfald to begin with, which the CEO Henrik Olesen explains in more detail and, may I say, wonderfully in his speech at Media Day. So you're welcome to watch the speech in my vlog from the day if you're interested in hearing his words on the matter. I usually don't talk about these types of topics, but I think it's very important to acknowledge it in this case of this specific review, as it is a situation that we should all show our greatest respect toward. But let's continue with the review once again and what this ride is all about. It's got the normal 8-rider trains for a Eurofighter, which means 4 people on each row over 2 rows, and they got a brand new comfort. At least to my knowledge, I haven't seen this before, but the modern trains feature different and more comfortable seating than the old trains to begin with, and the restraints make a huge difference. They're pretty much lap bars with massive shoulders, giving a massive amount of space for one's upper body, and they're generally comfortable.
Sweet!
They're also well padded by the head, which is pretty important on this ride, and I'll explain why later. But yeah, the new comfort is extremely welcome for me. The ride is 75.5 feet tall, which is the 6th or 7th tallest coaster in Denmark, depending on how you look at it. It's about 1 meter taller than Vildsvinet for reference, but it's only got a length of 984.3 feet. That is the shortest Eurofighter of all time, shorter than any of the small clones, and it's the only one that goes below 1,000 feet. It's tiny! And it's then got a speed of 44.7 miles an hour, which is the 7th or 9th fastest coaster in Denmark, once again depending on how you look at it. Some rides share statistics, that's why. And it's about half a kilometer an hour slower than Vildsvinet, interestingly. Now, the ride duration on this thing is 18 seconds long. Now that's short. It's the second shortest coaster I've ever ridden regarding duration from the lift to the brakes, only beaten by what is pretty much a backyard coaster, being Mariehønen at Brændegårdshaven, which clocks in at 13 seconds. Vindfald is 4 seconds shorter than Kake. That speaks volumes. And a final statistic, this thing has 2 inversions, a classic corkscrew and a classic vertical loop. Now let's talk about how it looks.
You're beautiful, it's true.
Ever since the ride structure began appearing during construction, it became pretty clear that this ride's appearance was going to be one of its strengths. It's goddamn gorgeous.
Damn, girl, what you saying? What you saying, huh?
When it was originally revealed, I prayed that it would have the colors of the concept art, and what it ended up with was even better. It's blueberry fucking juiciness mixed with gold. It's a beautiful color scheme, and the layout itself looks great as well. From the satisfying visuals of the 2 inversions, both of which just look great, to the clear star of the show, the funky wonky Donkey Kongy turnaround thing. That thing is unbelievably photogenic from literally any angle. And finally, the scenery of the trees and especially the water. I mean, it's truly one of the best looking coasters I've ever seen. Not quite as awesome looking as Phoenix for me regarding Danish coasters, but it's quite close. I also have to mention that it says fucking nothing.
Fucking nothing?
It's so unbelievably quiet.
It's so quiet.
I'm used to Vindfald, which, like any other old Eurofighter, manages to sound like an actual Eurofighter jet. This sounds like when it's snowing. It says nothing.
Fall.
The layout begins by pulling out of the station, turning to the left, and going to a block break, where it just stops. What a thrill.
Bro, when does this game get fucking good?
After then, you go up the vertical chain lift hill, and it almost feels like you're less vertical than usually on these things with the new comfort, but I dig it. I generally love vertical lift hills. Then you go into the beyond vertical drop of 97 degrees, super classic, but as great as ever. These have always been some of my absolute favorite drops on any coaster I've ridden. They might be short and very quick, but these drops are powerful, especially if you sit in the back row. You might not think there's a big difference in such a small car, but the back row is a little more prominent in the airtime. But no matter what, you will get strong ejector airtime on this drop that is unbelievably stomach dropping. As always, a fantastic start to these layouts and easily the best element on the ride. And you hit straight into the vertical loop. Now at the bottom of the drop and going into the loop, you immediately get crushed with great positive forces. They're not absolutely bone crushing, but you do definitely get a solid amount of G's. And if you're weak like me, you might actually start to get a little bit of a gray out effect already at the bottom of the loop. And then at the top of the loop, you get a very, very floaty sensation, on top of some delightful mild hang time. And then at the bottom of the loop again, you once again get a nice dose of positive forces that is once again very nice and sustained. Then you hop into the turnaround, which begins with like a twisted double up. The first pop in the turnaround gives a quick, snappy floater airtime pop, and I would say it's pretty solid floater airtime, but it is also a very quick pop, so it's more like a woo. It's a very fun little airtime moment that definitely adds something to the ride. And then at the top of the turnaround, you get a super weak floater airtime moment, and you get some nice laterals toward your right. Now on this element, I would absolutely recommend sitting on the right side of the car, because that makes a huge difference. The further you are to the right, the stronger the laterals will be. And then the turnaround's turn itself is actually pretty forceful, just like when you exit the loop. Nice and sustained, very solid positive forces. The next element is the corkscrew, and this was a surprisingly good corkscrew.
I liked it.
If you look at it from certain angles, you can see that it's kind of dragged out, which creates some euphoric hang time. You are out of your seat and it's really great. Then you finish off with a quick positive force kick before hopping into this bunny hill, which has some nice, also sort of sustained floater airtime that is also a little better in the back row. And I'd say it's pretty strong floater airtime toward the back as well. And then it gets slammed into the restraints because the brakes actually hit kind of hard, and because you are out of your seat with the airtime, it's harder to stop flying forward. And then that is the end of the ride. Short but very sweet layout. For a ride shorter than Max Force's launch, it's hard to go wrong with the pacing, so it doesn't. Let's be real, it's got like 5 elements in the actual layout and they're all kinda bangers. It's also very consistent with its forces, maybe except for the drop of course, since that's miles better than any other element automatically, and the ride feels rather quick too. Not speedy, but certainly not slowing down. The most important factor really to mention with the pacing on a ride like this is that even though it's short, it still kind of needs to warm up. On our first ride, I was kind of underwhelmed with the forces, but just a few rides later, it was immediately a lot better. So just let it warm up a bit and you will have no pacing problems.
Man, I just hit another pothole, bitch.
Now, if you've ridden this by now, I'm sure you know what I'm gonna say in this category. What the fuck happened here? The ride is generally completely fine regarding its smoothness. Nothing bad, nothing fantastic, but this one spot is just
This is awful in every way.
It's a headbanger. Going from the turnaround into the corkscrew tests your patience with Gerstlauer, I'm not gonna lie. When looking at it, it really looks like a shaping problem as well. This does not look quite right to me. What the fuck, man? But that being said, it's definitely not as bad as an SLC pothole, of which there are usually 10,000. But this moment here just gives you a really quick knock from side to side. If you lean your head forwards, it's certainly not as bad, but it really can catch at you with your pants down. But again, it's not really that bad. And I think the best way to really prove that is the fact that my friend Villas suffered an actual concussion while we was there, and he thought it was fine. And not a concussion from the ride, but from some months earlier. Concussions just last a few months, and this pothole didn't fuck him up, so that's why I mention it. And I think it's mainly because there's such great padding on the restraints that even though you hit the restraints with your head, it's kind of soft anyway. Now, a really interesting observation that my friend Fredrik from FABH Adventures noticed is the fact that the more people that are in the car, the more smooth it'll be. We really figured this out once we rode it on our own, just me and him in the front row. And this moment sucked. And we did that right after riding it with a full car, where it was actually completely fine. Sure, it was still the roughest part of the ride, but it wasn't at all like a massive pothole. And right after that, he rode it alone because he's a psychopath. But he's our psychopath. Interestingly, just like on Vildsvinel, the back row is also smoother than the front row. But yeah, the rest of the ride though is fine. It's not butter smooth, it shuffles and rattles a little bit, but nothing terrible, distracting, or painful. Just kind of there. Classic Gerstlauer, really. So overall, fine, just brace yourself right here. Vindfald doesn't really have a theme, except for falling. The name literally means windfall. The fuck does that even mean? Anyway, that was an easy category. Let's move on.
This is fine.
There's a surprising amount of things to say about this tiny ride. It was exactly the kind of replacement the park needed, small but thrilling and with a great and well-tested history of its model, which was very important to the park. Plus, it fits in the park extraordinarily well. I think a final overall rating for this as a coaster overall is 7.5 out of 10 for me. It's punchy, although not extremely forceful. It's a very satisfactory ride. It absolutely passes the vibe check. I absolutely love both inversions. All the airtime moments are also really fun, and there's no weak moment on the ride, except for the part that leaves you weak. I do hope they'll be able to do something about that spot right there, but I also kind of have my doubts. Again, it looks like a Gerstlauer issue from the beginning. I don't know. Nonetheless, I really like this ride. I'm extremely happy it's here. I wish Tivoli Friheden all the best luck with this thing moving forward. And let me know what you think about this ride down in the comments below, whether you've ridden it or not. Also, please be respectful if you want to comment anything about why this thing is here to begin with. And otherwise, thanks for watching. Bye!
I got to ride on the way to the top of the